Hello, everyone. My name is David Lenok. I'm a senior editor at wealthmanagement.com and Trust and Estates, and I'm here with Jamie Hopkins, CEO of Bryn Mawr Trust Advisors, LLC, Chief Wealth Officer of Bryn Mawr Trust. Thanks so much for joining us, Jamie.
Hey, thanks for having me on, David, and good to see you.
So today we're going to discuss the need to overhaul estate plans after the OBBBA. I know the name has changed, but we're still going to go with the old fun one. Based on an article in the October issue of Trust and Estates. The gist of that piece, written by Nicholas Kayamov and Jordan Lin, is that this new law triggers a critical and often overlooked question for clients and advisors, namely, do older estate plans designed around lower exemption amounts still work to carry out your intentions? However, before we jump directly into that discussion, let's pull things back a little bit for a broader view. Jamie, what are the biggest changes coming to estate planning under the OBBBA, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act?
Yeah, the one big beautiful bill, while you could argue it has a really big impact on estate planning, my view was it was kind of a smaller impact than some of the other versions we could have seen.
Mhm.
The big piece is moving up the federal estate and gift tax exemption again higher, up to $15 million per person, starting in 2026. Now, again, every bill always says, right, that's like a permanent exemption change. But as we've seen, right, every bill seems to make a new one. But, I mean, there was talk about that going away completely. There were actually even some Republicans pushing for a lower gift and estate tax exemption amount because it can be a revenue generator, at least on paper, for the government too. So if you're trying to manage the budget and all those things at once. So that was really the big one. Some of the other trust provisions that have been out there before about accumulated gains didn't make its way into the bill. So I'd say it ended up being somewhat minor, although obviously when we're talking about people's money and millions of dollars, it's not minor when it comes down to individual situations.
So we'll focus in a little bit, especially, so let's go with why might older estate plans, especially those who are using credit shelter trusts, no longer be effective?
Yeah, so one of the big questions, and you started off with this, is once these exemption amounts change, once laws change out there as it relates to estate planning, are these trusts and estate plans that we set up earlier under lower exemption amounts still as viable?
Mhm.
And one of the big themes across the entire article was, actually this step up in basis aspect of leaving assets at death versus getting them permanently outside of your estate earlier becomes more important as the exemption amount moves up, mostly because fewer and fewer people are impacted by estate taxes. So we don't really have to scramble around to avoid them.
Mhm.
Now, that being said, I said this a little bit earlier. My view, and I work with a trust company, is that for the last couple years, I'd say a very little amount of the trust work has been about avoiding the estate tax. It has really been about control. So if your old estate plan was really about control primarily, but then taking advantage of the tax rules as they were at the time, it's probably still fine. Now, if your entire plan was around avoiding taxes, it's probably time to review it again. That could be adding a new trust, it could be decanting or changing your old trust. Some of that can be really hard depending on how it was set up, because if it was really an old kind of credit shelter or bypass trust that was fully irrevocable from you, that might just be set. But you might need additional things now on top of it to take advantage of these larger exemption amounts in 2026.
So, yeah, as you mentioned, as sort of fewer states and as fewer trusts are worried about, state tax specifically, there still are these tools to use. So, does this new law change how we think about the basis step up itself and capital gains planning in general?
Yeah, the main thing that you'll see as this moves up is less people trying to irrevocably get rid of their assets via trust. So it's going to be more revocable trusts, more maybe irrev at the time of death, testamentary type trusts. But we're okay with holding these things to our state now because we will get this step up in basis from assets that get left right at death in our estate. Not every asset, but most of them get step up in basis tax treatment. Versus when we gift and transfer assets across while we are alive, we get this kind of carryover of our existing basis. So for a lot of business owners, they had a very small basis in their company. They grow tremendously. And that has to become a question now, right? Do you try to hold more of that to end of life versus transferring it at smaller chunks throughout your life to your heirs? That's going to be one of the biggest conversations out there as it relates to estate tax. But what I would say is when we, going back to this again, when we look at most irrevocable trust planning situations, a big portion of it is about control. It's about making sure that you know who's going to be managing these assets, who's going to be getting what. And if you're trying to make it go for multi generations, it's not just about avoiding taxes or minimizing taxes. It's really about setting up parameters today that help manage that control aspect. So they definitely really still play a role, and you're going to still see lots of people under this $30 million for couples using estates regularly with trusts and irrevocable trusts in them to manage that control and
Mhm.
distribution aspect.
So, I mean, what should the families themselves be doing now to prepare for these changes alongside advisors?
Yeah, I think whenever we have big law changes. This is a big enough law change where you should at least have that conversation if you're a family with your advisor, with your trust professional, or your estate planning attorney and say, do we need to do anything different? For the most part, attorneys are not in a situation in which they're giving ongoing advice as it relates to estate planning. So you actually kind of have to be proactive from the individual. Or the other side is, I actually think that's one of the big values of advisors is we are proactively engaged. Most of the estate planning work is transactional. You go in, you get your documents, you leave, you're not paying an ongoing fee. So when laws change, you're not getting that constant call. So I think that's where families and advisors can come together and say, what do we need to change? Do we need to update some of our language in our trusts? Do we need to add new trusts? Do we need to decant and change existing trusts to add, some flexibility inside of those? So those are going to be the main things that we want to look at. But this definitely sparks up if you have a large estate, and I'm really talking probably $10 million or over of assets. It's a good time to have this conversation again.
So, as we come to the end of our fast chat here, let's pull the lens back a bit again, or I guess push it forward. Looking ahead, what risks or uncertainties should people keep in mind with estate tax laws just in general now?
Yeah, the big risk is always what happens when this changes again. And what you actually see very quickly often, and I would expect this early in 2026, is actually a flurry of trust work occurring and estate tax work occurring because people are going to want to take advantage of this new expanded exemption as fast as possible so that in 3 or 4 years you don't see a new tax law come in and see that pulled back down to generate more tax revenue. So I think that's one thing to always keep in mind. The second one is, and then hopefully this has been a theme throughout what I've said, is most of your decisions around your estate planning, including your trust work, should not be primarily driven by tax laws today. I always tell people that, like, start with the outcome that you want, right? Whether it's control, who you want these assets to go to, your family, multi-generational planning, it should revolve around that. And then the tax work is secondary. Then we try to accomplish your goals in your estate plan is tax efficiently as humanly possible. And that will continue to change. It will be slightly different in 2026 than it is today, right? Like laws will continue to modify, move, shift. The big one, like this one, we probably won't see another one before 2026, but there will be small ones. So we have to keep focused on, right, not overreacting to tax law changes that will continue to move.
Well, that's about all the time we have. Thanks so much for joining us, Jamie, and for helping to break down what can be a very frightening document on its face into a bit more of a biteable chunk for people to understand. Thanks so much, Jamie.
Well, thanks for having me on again.
And for all our viewers, if you'd like to know more about these topics, check out the article itself, Overhauling Older Estate Plans After the OBBBA, on trustandestates.com.